Hey everybody, good evening slash early morning. I know I'm coming to you guys very late. I apologize. I had a super busy day today. Some things just unexpected that I had to take care of and focus on. So I apologize. But I am here now. So hello. How y'all doing? Right? Um, I wanted to come on today. It's such a special day. Just to kind of memorialize and remember September 11th, right? It's been over 20 years, and everyone that was a little bit older can have some fond memories that are just embedded in our mind about what happened that day. So I wanted to share my experience on September 11th and just kind of go back in time, back it up to 2001 and talk about what happened. So I think it's important to keep um, that memory around for the younger people because technically this is um, the most massive terrorist attack in the United States. So we do want to remember our history and pass that on to the youth, to younger people, and just acknowledge that day and all of the heroes. And we're talking about people that stepped up, that went into the building, that were doing a job. So you're looking at law enforcement, you're looking at firemen, you're looking at people just off the street that see a need and they're running to the fire, they're running to the smoke. Honestly, I have been to New York so many times. I have been to the area where the Trade Center was prior to 9/11. So I saw the Twin Towers. Um, it was just a massive sadness after September 11th. It was not the same going to New York, visiting New York, staying in New York. When I saw everything happen on TV, right? I was I was really surprised. I had not seen it anything like that before. I was actually getting dressed. I was at home in my bedroom watching just the news before I went off to school. I was in college at the time. And it just was like playing on the news, and it had a banner running across that said there was a plane that crashed in front of the Twin Towers. So the Twin Towers had been probably in the New York area some of the tallest buildings. So these are super tall high rises, side by side, kind of a mixed building with offices, professionals, um, just just massive amount of people in these buildings, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people in the building. So in the past, when I would go to New York, I would go to the shopping district. Sometimes I stayed in New Jersey. Sometimes I stayed in Connecticut. Sometimes I stayed in New York. I would be in different areas, just having fun, getting on the train, shopping, eating. It was just an exciting thing when you're young, right? One time, my family actually did a big trip to New York because I had an uncle that lived there. So all of us went one time as a large group, but I have been multiple times with my sister, with my cousins. It's just a great place to go to. And I have returned multiple times with my daughter, my nephews, and nieces, doing some more family trips and everything, but it really hasn't been the same. After 9/11, I can remember going and they would have these large, um, it's like fencing up, and the fence had like material over it to cover up the space so you didn't have to see it. But there was so much rubbish, trash, and materials, and I can just remember that moment when I was watching TV and I saw the headline, and I'm like, wow, what is going on? Because if you've been to New York, there's a skyline, right? So I have it behind me in the virtual background. Um, there's a skyline of all these beautiful, tall buildings. Most of them are high rises. So when you look at the Statue of Liberty, it's in the water, but when you look at the skyline, it's just a ton of buildings. So the Twin Towers stood out because pretty much they were like twice as tall as many of the buildings around them, right? So when you think about that and just the magnitude of how tall the buildings were, if you're coming in New York and you're on a plane, these buildings are standing out, right? You can easily see them. They're you know so many feet above the other buildings. So I could see them being kind of an easy target because all of the other buildings are back then were much shorter. And when the first plane hit, I was just like, what the F? You know, like what is going on? I didn't understand it because I know in those office space you have so much glass. You have these huge, massive floors, 30, 40, 50 floors. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this has got to be terrifying. But I had a little hope because when I saw the first plane crash, it was smoke and it was glass. They kind of slowed it down and kept replaying it over and over again. I stopped in my tracks, right? I wasn't really sure about school, so that was in the back of my mind. But I said, well, I'm getting dressed and getting prepared. I'll just keep watching it because I didn't know. It was like breaking news. So I'm watching it and I'm seeing the glass. You're seeing all these papers just fly out the window, glass shatter, and they would slow it down and they would show you like a slow impact. And I'm like, wow, like this is crazy. So I'm seeing the smoke and I'm like, okay, by it being hit higher up, you have a lot of floors below. So immediately, how are all these people going to get out of the building, right? That's like a lot of people's biggest fear, like working on floor 40, and I have to get out of this office building, and it's 39 floors below. So I'm thinking, you can't use the elevator. It's emergency. How are all these people going to get out? So I'm immediately thinking, like, Lord, let me just pray that, the damage is limited to maybe like a 10 floor area and that the people above and the people below can start to exit. So that's where my mind was at when I initially saw the first plane go into the Twin Tower. There was some people that had access to some of the bigger media outlets, and they were literally working in the other Twin Tower, and they were on the phone kind of saying like, wow, what is going on from my view, because they're literally right across from each other and they're giving their you know kind of take on what has happened. Like, did you just see that? Yes, I saw the plane. How close is it? And is there a fire and how many floors? Like, they're literally describing what is happening. And all of a sudden, because this is live broadcast, you see a second plane coming. I'm like, what? What the? And I'm just like, oh my goodness. It dawned on me then, this is a terrorist attack. Two planes in New York flying in this low. They're coming right in and they're going to crash into the second tower. When I saw that, I don't know. It was not a helpless feeling, but it was just a realization that, some safety that you believe you have in some parts of humanity that you feel like this people, you don't anticipate someone planning this type of attack because these people, they're in their ordinary day, right? These people have gone to work. These people have dropped their kids off at daycare. It's early in the morning. I think it was was before 9. I can't remember. You're looking at like 20 years. But I just thought to myself, like, I'm on my way to school. So I can only imagine all of the people that had already arrived in the building at work, dropped their kids off at daycare at the Twin Towers, because this is an active building, right? You have thousands of people in both towers. And because this is New York has buildings everywhere, right? Different structures, restaurants, shops, just so many different businesses that there's not a lot of free space, right, in New York. So I'm thinking when the first plane hit, there was some hope. When the second plane hit, and there was a lot of smoke, right? It was a lot of smoke. And I was just thinking to myself, because of the way that the towers were built, being so tall, was there a chance that the towers could come down? Because I'm looking at the structure of the building, and I know it's more science than just my thinking, but if a building structure and the engineering becomes unstable, my biggest fear was both of these buildings potentially being so close, especially how the plane kind of like eclipsed it on the side. I was worried, like, are these towers going to come down? So, what I did was I said, let me get out of here. Let me get to school and let's see what happens when I get to school. Initially, it took a few minutes, I believe, for those towers to come down. I don't remember how long it took, but I know I live close to the university, so I got to school. Once I got to campus, they decided to shut down the school. So I had the day to myself, kind of the morning to myself, and I just kept trying to catch up with the news, because back then it's 2001, right? So you're not having like everything, downloaded to you immediately. So I'm keeping up. And when I heard the towers had come down and the way they came down, it was almost as if you had taken, you know how you have a slinky and you can stretch it out and then you can close it? It's like this, and then you just shut it. The towers had come down, they crashed down so slow. I was just like, oh my word. How can anybody survive this, right? Thinking in my head, it was so much smoke. You could almost hear the buildings collapsing. And it was just so much smoke. It was like, I don't know if you take a vacuum and just throw the dust up. It was a enormous amount of smoke from the buildings collapsing, and they just quietly came down slowly, and all of this smoke, smog. And I can remember people being on the street, being in different places around, like different stores, businesses on the street, standing in the street. And when the building started coming down, you were hearing screams and, oh my, word. And people started to run, like try to outrun the smoke. But it was like the smoke just covered it's just a massive amount of smoke. And you could see the people just running in the street, and the smoke just covered everything. It was just something to see. And I shared some videos on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. It was really I honestly cannot imagine being in New York at that moment, because after the towers came down, you already had emergency support going into the towers before they came down. They were going into the towers. So you had police officers, you had firemen, you have red just trying to get people out right. And nobody's thinking these towers are coming down. So you have officers going in trying to bring aid and order, and you have ambulances and different fire engines all over coming into the area to try to aid. And I could just remember thinking like, oh my goodness, how do you how do you manage this when you have people fleeing, trying to get out of the building? You're trying to have aid come into the building. It's so chaotic. It's so many people. You had people that had children in the daycare, so they're at work. They're not even in the area. So it was just a lot going on. And when the buildings came down, just crashing down, it was just something unimaginable. Um, I can just remember seeing um, the brick and the ash, and um, people just being dazed by what happened. Like it happened so fast, and it was unexpected and horrid and sad and unbelievable. And the debris, pow, pow, just mountains high, just so high. And when you're thinking about, we're going to search for survivors, what a daunting task, right? You're in New York, you have all of this smoke and ash and material and concrete, and you're mounting up groups to just go in to search for survivors. And for days they did it. I mean, they searched and searched and looked and pulled people out. And so I'm going to read about the time frame that everything happened. I do want to touch a little bit on the plane. I think it was Flight 93, United Airlines Flight 93. Um, a lot of the people on the plane, they knew the plane was hijacked. They were making calls, final calls, trying to reach their loved ones. So in some of the videos, you hear a lot of voicemails because people were calling home. Um, People were trying to reach their spouses and, leave messages for their kids to let them know that it was really not too much that they could do um, because the plane was hijacked and they wanted to say goodbye. So I can remember that morning. I think President Bush was in Texas. I can't remember what state he was in, but I remember he was at an elementary school. They may have been second, third grade. I can't remember, but he was listening to the students were reading, and he was engaging them and listening to them read. And someone came in and they whispered in his ear, and the look that he had on his face was paralyzing. He didn't really respond to the information. He was able to let the children complete that part of their task with the reading. I think it took maybe less than 10 minutes, and then he went right into um, probably some briefing, and then he had a press conference. But it was so sad because I can just imagine being, you know, in leadership and having that information given, and you're expected to respond, right? And in difficult times, sometimes you just have to access that information, and we ought to give people grace. Um, the look on his face, for me, the way his eyes looked, how it seemed that he was really processing the information. You know, it really touched my heart when he went down to ground zero, because the level of care, the sensitivity, the humanity, the coming together of people, uh, that is a lot of what I saw in New York and across the country. The support, so many people were never found. They were presumed to be unalive because they could not find their bodies. Um, it was pretty difficult because that that terrorist attack had a ripple effect. It had an effect on the economy. It had an effect on international relations. It had put a target um, for the actors to um, be held accountable, right? And as a college student, and nearing the end of my graduation when it happened, I graduated that year. Um, that December, everything for me had changed. It had put so many stops in the economy. You know, very difficult to just graduate and find opportunities, because this was something that it impacted New York, but it was a ripple, like a wave, and it went across the country. And for many, many years, the United States went to great lengths to try to uncover the why. Well, we can talk about the why. Um, Sometimes people want to inflict harm, pain, something monetary, something, you know human life, things like that. So that is part of the why. And when you're defenseless, so this is not military against military, or country against country, or your army against my army. That's not what it was. It was vulnerabilities, um, things that you can place as a target, weaknesses that you feel may exist, because it was a very targeted attack, and that's why the attacks happened at the same time. And I can remember when the planes were grounded and there was no travel, because they had to get control of the airspace. Where are planes going and coming, right? Because they didn't know if it would be another attack somewhere. Almost in every major city, right, there's places that would be vulnerable, right? So this was a really, really big deal in history, and I just want to acknowledge it. Um, I have seen the memorial. So when the towers came down, there was a decision not to rebuild them. When they didn't rebuild them, they thought of all kind of designs to replace the space, but to replace the space as a memorial. So there was not going to be another physical building or structure put back in those two spaces. So their decision and design was made to go with a memorial fountain in the names of all the victims, all of the officers, all of the firemen, all of the people that lost their life um, from the attack. So if you go there, it's complete now. It's been complete for years. It's beautiful. It's a water fountain tribute, and the names are engraved in stone around the fountain. And I've been there, and I'm trying to find the video. It's been, maybe, I don't know, 10 years. It's been a long time since I've been to the memorial. And, it's a beautiful now. So let's talk about what happened in detail, right? There is a memorial page that's set up for all things about September 11th, right? It's on the page as a link, so you can check that out. But I'm going to detail more of the timeline of what happened. Okay, so there's a link on the Hidden Horror page, and it's from Timeline. It's labeled the September 11th terrorist attacks, Miller Center. And it's on millercenter.org. On September 11, 2001, 2,977 people were unalived in the deadliest terrorist attacks in American history. The moment shocked the nation. Two planes hijacked by Islamic jihadists vowing death to all Americans plowed into both towers at the World Trade in New York. Another plane was flown into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. A fourth plane, presumably headed for the White House or the U.S. Capitol, was heroically diverted by passengers and ended up crashing in an empty field in Pennsylvania. After reports of the first plane hitting the North Tower, millions watched the second plane hit the South Tower on live television. That was me. I literally saw the second plane and I was just stunned, just completely shocked. Seeing it live and not expecting it. And as I was watching, there was a man on the phone in the second tower reporting what was going on in the first tower, and then his building was hit. So it was shocking. It was a terrifying, startling, and humbling event for the country. Excuse me. The 9/11 attacks were the deadliest on American soil since the shock attack at Pearl Harbor 60 years before, and the sense of outrage was reminiscent of that moment. The attacks in New York occurred in the country's busiest city on a busy workday, and the staggered nature of the attacks meant that news footage captured almost everything as it happened, ensuring that millions of Americans saw the events precisely as they unfolded. So here's the timeline. On September 11, 2001, 5:45 a.m., Mohammed Atta and Abdul Aziz Al Omari, two of the intended hijackers passed through security at the Portland International Jetport in Maine. They board a commuter flight to Boston Logan International Airport. They then board American Airlines Flight 11. So Flight 11 was the flight that the passengers, they came together and they rallied to stop the hijackers. This is the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. Okay. 7:59 a.m. Flight 11 takes off from Boston, headed for Los Angeles, California. There are 76 passengers, 11 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. So Flight 11 has 76 passengers and 5 hijackers on board. So those are pretty good to fight back, right? 8:15 a.m. United Airlines Flight 175 takes off from Boston, also headed for Los Angeles. There are 51 passengers, 9 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. 8:19 a.m. A flight attendant on Flight 11, Betty Ann Ong, alerts ground personnel that a hijacking is underway and that the cockpit is unreachable. So they were in flight for about 20 minutes on Flight 11 when the flight attendant Betty informed ground personnel, that there was a hijacking underway. 8:20 a.m. American Airlines Flight 77 takes off from Dulles, outside of Washington, D.C., headed for Los Angeles. There are 53 passengers, 6 crew members, and 5 hijackers on board. So Flight 77 has 5 hijackers on board. 8:24 a.m. Mohammed Atta, a hijacker on Flight 11, unintentionally alerts air controllers in Boston to the attack. He meant to press the button that allowed him to talk to the passengers on his flight. So one of the hijackers on Flight 11, he mistakenly informs the air traffic controllers that he's hijacking. He meant to talk to the passengers. 8:37 a.m. After hearing the broadcast from Atta on Flight 11, Boston Air Traffic Control alerts the U.S. Air Force's Northeast Defense Sector, who then mobilized the Air National Guard to follow the plane. 8:42 a.m. United Flight 93 takes off from Newark, New Jersey, after a delay due to routine traffic. It was headed for San Francisco, California. There are 33 passengers, 7 crew members, and 4 hijackers are on board. 8:46 a.m. Flight 11 crashes into the World Trade Center North Tower. All passengers aboard are instantly unalive, and employees of the World Trade Center are trapped above the 91st floor. So 90 and below, they have to get out. Can you imagine getting out when you're on the 90th floor? Unheard of, right? So everybody that's above, everybody that's above 90, the 90th floor, they're trapped. So sad. 9:03 a.m. Flight 175. So the planes are about 17 minutes apart then. Flight 175 crashes into the World Trade Center's South Tower. All passengers aboard are unalived instantly, and so are an unknown number of people in the tower. So when Flight 175 hits the South Tower, all the passengers also are unalive, and everybody that's in that area are also unalive in that tower. 2 minutes later, 9:05 a.m., President George W. Bush in an elementary school classroom in Florida is informed about the hit on the second tower. His chief of staff, Andrew Card, whispers the chilling news into the president's ear. Bush later wrote about his response. I made the decision not to jump up immediately and leave the classroom. I didn't want to roll the kids. I wanted to project a sense of calm. I had been in enough crises to know that the first thing the leader has to do is to project calm. You know, he gained a lot of respect from me, how he handled everything. I was very, very proud of President Bush. I felt that he deserved grace in how he handled the situation. I believe he did the right thing. So about 23 minutes later, 9:28 a.m., hijackers attack Flight 93. 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. All passengers aboard are instantly unalive, and so are 125 civilian and military personnel in the building. So a lot of staff that worked in the Pentagon building were unalive from the crash. 9:45 a.m., U.S. airspace is shut down under Operation Yellow Ribbon. All civilian aircraft are ordered to land at the nearest airport because they had to get control of the situation. They don't know what plane is potentially a target for another city, not necessarily even in New York. You have major cities all across the country, almost in every state, right? So they had to take that move. 9:55 a.m., Air Force One with President George W. Bush aboard takes off from Florida. 9:57 a.m., passengers aboard Flight 3 began to run up toward the cockpit. Jara, the pilot, begins to roll the plane back and forth in an attempt to destabilize the revolt. So the passengers that are on Flight 93, they've come together. They've decided we are going to do something about this hijacking. And they rush the cockpit. They're going to do something about it. 9:59 a.m., the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. Man, that was one of the saddest moments. The tower slowly came down. It was extremely sad. Extremely sad. Unbelievable. It didn't even seem real. Honestly, when I recall it, when I think about it, I can still see it happening in my brain. Did not seem real. It seemed like something they call a CDI, where you do it on a computer. It just seemed fake, but it wasn't. I mean, I saw the plane crash into the tower myself, so it was on live TV. While I'm looking at the tower, the North Tower, with the first plane, 10:02 a.m., Flight 93 plows into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Although its ultimate target is unknown, it was likely heading for either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. 10:18 a.m. Let's go back. So we have 4 planes, 3 areas. So we have the 2 planes. The first plane hit the tower. The second plane hit the South Tower. Then we have the plane that hit the Pentagon. And then the last plane, the passengers on the flight, they decided to rush the cockpit. This is causing the plane to come down, but they believe the intended target was either the White House or the U.S. Capitol. Okay, so we have all of that together. That all happened in about an hour, about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, so we all on the same page. 10 a.m. President Bush authorizes any non-grounded planes to be shot down. So all the planes were supposed to go to the nearest airport. They had given them about 30 minutes? Let me see. That was about 9:45 a.m. So now this is 10:18 a.m. So there's no more time. If you are not grounded and you are still flying in U.S. airspace, your plane will be shot down. President Bush authorizes any non-grounded planes to be shot down. At that time, all 4 hijacked planes had already crashed, but the president's team was operating under the impression that Flight 93 was still in the air. But the passengers took over, they took control. And this is what I always tell people. If there is an opportunity to get away, to fight back, do it. Do it. If somebody tries to snatch you, excuse me, somebody tries to snatch you, abduct you, do not let them get you in the car. Don't let them get you in the trunk or the house. Fight back. Try to get away, make noises, scream. Do everything you can. Everything you can. Okay? Ten 28 a.m. The North Tower of the World Trade Center collapses. So the South Tower, which was hit second, it collapsed at 9:59 a.m. So we're only having minutes between the 2 towers collapsing. The South Tower collapses at 9:59 a.m. The North Tower collapses at 10:28 a.m. So they're about 30 minutes apart when they collapse. And that's a lot of time, but it's not when it's thousands of people. And the towers are so tall, upwards of 100 floors. Trying to get all the people out safely is a daunting task. 10:53 a.m. The Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, orders the U.S. military to move to a higher state of alert, going to Con 3. 11:45 a.m. Air Force One lands at Barksdale Air Force Base near Shreveport, Louisiana. 12:15 p.m. Airspace in the United States is completely free of all commercial and private flights. 1:30 p.m. Air Force One leaves Barksdale. 2:30 p.m. Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York, visits the fallen twin towers of the World Trade Center at what becomes known as Ground Zero. What a tough day. 3 p.m. Air Force One lands at Afu Air Force Base in Nebraska, and President Bush is immediately taken to a secure bunker that is capable of withstanding a nuclear attack. 4:30 p.m. Air Force One leaves Offutt and heads back towards Andrews Air Force Base near Washington, D.C. 5:30 p.m. Building 7 of the World Trade Center collapses. 8:30 p.m. President Bush addresses the nation. Although too many Americans 911 seemed like a random act of terror, the roots of the event had been developing for years. A combination of factors that coalesced in the late 1990s led the catastrophic event. These factors included regional conditions in the Middle East that motivated the perpetrators, as well as intelligence lapses and failures that left the United States vulnerable. Osama bin Laden was relatively unknown in the United States before 9/11, even as he was amassing popularity, followers, and fame in the Middle East during the 1990s. In 1988, he was one of the founders of Al-Qaeda, a militant Islamic terrorist organization that organized and carried out 9/11 attacks. Bin Laden called for indiscriminating killing of all Americans who he claimed were the worst thieves in the world today. It was the perfect historical moment for that rallying cry. Throughout the 20th century, a wave of secular nationalist revolutions swept through the Middle East, taking root in Egypt, Libya, Iraq, Yemen, and other countries. While these movements were awash in promising ideology, the new regimes quickly became autocratic and suppressed. Their critics turned to violent revolution to express their dissatisfaction with the secular government. At the same time, social malaise, especially among young men who were struggling to find decent jobs and start their own families in corrupt oil states, provided easy targets for radicalization. Bin Laden's message that America was the head of the snake and the root of all society's problems resonated well with the discontent. By the mid 1990s, bin Laden was the head of Al Qaeda, a multifaceted and highly developed terrorist network carrying out attack after attack on Americans in the Middle East. It was a new type of terrorism to which the U.S. intelligence agencies struggled to adapt. Much of the intelligence community had not even imaged the specific type of hijacking and terrorism carried out on 9/11. They were preparing for threats such as the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center and bombing in 2000 of the USS Cole. Much of the intelligence community's focus was on reactive law enforcement activity rather than proactive of terrorism. A telling quote from the 9/11 Commission report focuses on the lack of a proactive response. The process was meant by its nature to mark for the public as the events finished. Case solved, justice done. It was not designed to ask if the events might be harbingers of worse to come, nor did it allow for aggregating and analyzing facts to see if they could provide clues to terrorist tactics more generally, methods of entry and finance, and mode of operation inside the United States. Bin Laden had amassed substantial power during conditions in the Middle East, as well as his charismatic leadership. I don't see how he would be a good leader. And the U.S. intelligence community was under prepared for a 9/11 style attack. In the aftermath of 9/11, these two factors continued to affect U.S. policy in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq. The immediate response to 9/11 was the George W. Bush administration's war on terror, which began in Afghanistan as a retaliation against Al Qaeda for carrying out the attack. The Bush administration soon expanded the war on terror into Iraq, and the consequences of these wars continue to affect the Middle East to this day. Almost 20 years later, the United States is still at war in both Afghanistan and Iraq. There were domestic long term effects of 9/11 as well. Thousands of people struggle with cancer and lasting chronic health problems relating to the toxicity from Ground Zero, the site where the Twin Towers used to stand. The September 11th attacks also changed American air travel as airlines began to require stringent security checks designed to prevent the types of weapons hijackers use from slipping through. Finally, the 9/11 attacks resulted in changes to the federal government and an expansion of executive power. A new cabinet department, the Department of Homeland Security, was created, and the intelligence community was consolidated under the Director of National Intelligence to improve coordination between various agencies and departments. New legislation, such as the USA Patriot Act, expanded domestic security and surveillance, disrupted terrorist funding by cracking down on activists such as money laundering, and increased efficiency within the U.S. intelligence community. The tragedy of September 11, 2001 will never be forgotten, and the aftermath is still continuing to unfold. The 9/11 Memorial and Museum opened on the site of the former World Trade Center on September 11, 2011, and features reflecting pools and the footprints of where the Twin Towers once stood. They have some frequently asked questions on the Memorial Museum for September 11th. So I'll go over some of these because it's good to just know some of this information. The World Trade Center was a 16-acre commercial complex in Lower Manhattan that contained 7 buildings, a large plaza, and an underground shopping mall that connected 6 of the buildings. The centerpieces of the complex were the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers were the tallest buildings in New York City at 110 stories each. One World Trade Center North Tower and two World Trade Center South Tower provided nearly 10 million square feet of office space for about 35,000 people and 430 companies. For a brief period upon their completion in 1973, they were the tallest buildings in the world. I know they were the tallest in New York because if you were on a plane, you could clearly see them coming in. If you were driving in, you could see them some miles away. So they definitely were the tallest buildings. Um, Somebody asked a question: why did the terrorists attack the World Trade Center and the Pentagon? And this is their response. I'll just read a little bit of it. The terrorists did not have the capacity to destroy the United States military, so they set their sights on symbolic targets instead. The Twin Towers, as the centerpieces of the World Trade Center, symbolize globalization and America's economic power and prosperity. Let's see. The Pentagon, as the headquarters for the U.S. Department of Defense, serves as a symbol of American military power. It is thought that Flight 93 was headed to the Capitol building, the center of American legislative government. Al Qaeda hoped that by attacking these symbols of American power, they would promote widespread fear throughout the country and severely weaken the United States' standing in the world community, ultimately supporting their political and religious goals in the Middle East and the Muslim world. So that was a question that was on the 9/11 frequently asked questions for the Memorial Museum. You can check it out, later if you like. So I'm gonna play a video you can just listen to. It's about the attack on the Pentagon. So at 9:07 a.m., the flight crashed into the Pentagon.
Crystal City, just north of Crystal City. Stop all the departures. Looks like it went in the Pentagon.
Okay, I just wanted to share some of the video sound. Um, you can watch the video. It's a link on the page. I also shared some other videos just showing the attack on the Twin Towers. Um, I hope that through remembering the events and the people and the spirit of everyone coming together, that this will bring some solace. It's 20 years, but it will bring some solace that you cannot let anything or anyone deter you. Things are going to happen. You are going to have challenges. You are going to come across hard times, difficulties, times when you may feel like I'm tired and I'm considering giving up. We can't do anything about the past. We can only look for the future, looking forward. So we want to take every day as an opportunity. We want to live a fulfilled life. We want to take lessons from the past so we learn from them. We apply things that we know for our protection, for our safety, but we have to go on. And part of going on is you still carry all of these memories. Just hearing September 11th, knowing that on a Tuesday, 22 years ago, this happened to people for no reason. No reason. Because they're not fulfilled, satisfied in their life where they live. They may be oppressed. So they want to cause pain and suffering for others. So this is why I just implore everybody to live your life to the fullest, taking every day as an opportunity, following your goals on what you have ahead of you. That should be your drive and motivation. Greatness. Being a trailblazer, right? So I think it's appropriate. We cannot say all of the almost 3,000 names of people that were lost. But I think we can have a fair moment of silence to remember all of the families, the men and women and law enforcement and the first responders and the people in Manhattan and the businesses and everybody that stood up, stood together, tried to help, tried to save lives, try to pull people out, search for bodies, search for the missing. Let's remember them. Let's take a moment to think about them, lift them up, say thank you, and come together in agreement that they didn't have all this time that we've had, but that we're working on something great. We're coming together as a community with love, unity. Sad moment in history that I experienced, and I know people all across the country can recall what they were doing, where they were going, what happened, what they saw, what they felt on September 11th. We're not going to let hate stop us. We're going to keep going. We're going to pursue our dreams. We're going to reach that destination. And we're going to have happiness and joy. I declare it. I declare it on us. Friends, we are alive. We are not. Okay? So let's be encouraged. Let's be inspired. Let's get motivated. Let's do everything we can to bring about what we want to see in our community, in our families, in our life with our kids. Okay? So I want to thank you for going down this road with me in remembering September 11th, what happened that day, lifting up all the victims, all the families, all the loved ones, the community, the country, because it had an effect across the world. What happened had an effect. Okay? So thank you for checking out this video. Thank you for spending this time with me. And hopefully you'll check out another video on my playlist. And hopefully I'll see you in a future video, right? So thank you kindly for your time tonight. I want you to stay smart, stay savvy. Okay, friends? Take care of yourself. Be well. Thank you for checking out the video. Have a good night. Bye, friends. Bye.